This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Our first author grew up in Arkansas at a time when African Americans were not welcome. But through his book entitled My Journey Through the Black Sacred Cosmos, he hopes to help educators better understand minority students, their experiences, and guide them toward a fulfilling life.
Okay, my name is James Wilburn. I'm now living in Spokane, Washington. And I started writing the book when I was in undergrad at Lamont College in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was in 2000. But then when I got here, I started reflecting. So last year I started writing My Journey Through the Black Sacred Cosmos because I was working with public schools and some kids were struggling with graduating, some African American students. So the issue of ACEs came up, ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. And the teachers were struggling trying to teach them. And I was sharing with them, but you're teaching from a Eurocentric perspective, and these children have different experiences. So they don't quite understand where you're coming from, and you don't understand where they're coming from. So there's a one-size-fits-all that won't work for everybody that you're using, you know. And the book is about my childhood growing up. And I grew up during the Jim Crow era. So I realized as an adult, I had ACEs too, as adverse childhood experiences. So I wanted to share with people, you can have these experiences and overcome.
When you say you were educated in the Black Sacred Cosmos, what do you mean by that?
Well, I was born in a white city. We were forced out into a town called Sunset. Sunset got its name because it was a place where you were supposed to go to die. I was born in Marion where my dad owned a hotel, the Black Cat Hotel. We were burned out of the hotel because he wouldn't sell. So then after he sold the lot, and we bought lots in Sunset, and we got burned out twice in Sunset. By the age of 6, I had been burned out 3 times. So it was a higher being, I believe, based upon my upcoming, because you had to go to church in my family, that you was protected by God and his angels. And that's why I call it the Black Sacred Cosmos, because they shield me from these Europeans who really meant me no good. Okay. So what we have to do as educators, we have to take the time to get to know who the student that we're teaching. These kids come to school dragging a ball and chain. There's no food, or either, mama drunk or daddy drunk, or strangers in the house abusing them, or it's all kinds of things that happen to them. And you're saying, sit down, be quiet, get your pencil paper out here and take the questions on the board, no talking. That won't work for every child. Right. Single-time graduation rate of African Americans when they called me in as an achievement gap intervention specialist. And when I left that school, the superintendent called me out. It was an 84% on-time graduation rate. She called me out and sent me to a school that had 1,500 students and 2,200 suspensions in 1 year. Mm. And I was the only African-American in that dealing with that issue. And it overwhelmed me, really, to find out that there were some educators, some teachers who was kicking kids out of their class and would follow them down to the principal's office to make sure that they were kicked out of school. And so I was sharing with them, that's not your job. Your job is in the classroom. It's up to the office to determine what to do with this child. Right. So it was all kinds of things that I was dealing with in the school. So, I'm just saying it's work to be done, in our right. public school system. I speak at different schools. Usually they have me come and speak on Martin Luther King convocations, But right. Then that's my opportunity to talk about some of the things that's happened to me and how Dr. Martin Luther King impacted my life. And I mentioned that in the book, that on my 16th birthday, 16 minutes from my doorstep, Dr. King was assassinated. Yeah. 16 minutes from my doorstep on my 16th birthday. Wow. But that was my wake-up call. That's when I understood what Dr. King was all about, and I became involved.
if there is one person that you can reach through this book, you've done your job.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's a quote from Dr. King. If I can help one somebody along the way, then my living would not be in vain.
You know what? That's all any of us can hope to do. Thanks, James. The inspiration for our next author is his children. Their trips together have motivated him to write and publish 3 books entitled The Hansen Clan, a Washington, D.C. adventure, The Hansen Clan, Trouble in the Grand Canyon, and The Hansen Clan, Ghost Town.
Hi, my name is Bjorn Borson. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm a nurse by trade since 1993. I started writing our trips we took with their kids, and from those trips, the 3 books that I've got so far out through Page Publishing have been produced. They're really fun action-adventure kind of stories that kind of took place from where we had visited on RV trips as we traveled around the U.S. In 2007, we started our first trip. We went up the East Coast from Tennessee, and our first stop was in Washington, D.C. And while we were sitting in Ford's Theater where President Lincoln was assassinated, I started thinking of a kind of a cool little story where the little kids think they see somebody steal something and some sort of artifact from the museum. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And when we traveled, we had my 2 kids and my 2 nieces. And so I wrote a story where the 4 of them see something happen and take it upon them to help solve the mystery, because obviously the kids, nobody believes them. And so they kind of have to go and figure out who it was, what they did, and stop them on their own.
So then we move on to Trouble in the Grand Canyon.
That was our second year. We took a trip down through the Southwest. And the Trouble in the Grand Canyon, it's funny because when I was a kid with my parents, I actually almost fell in the Grand Canyon while walking down the mule trails. And so when we took our RV trip with our kids, BJ did almost the exact same thing, my oldest son. And so as soon as I saw him do that, the whole story is kind of like popped into my head, where one by one, the kids, by trying to help the first one who fell in, they all end up falling in the canyon far away from where any visitors and stuff like that are. And they try and find, but as they do, they stumble upon some bad guys who are stealing from the local Havasupai Indians.
And how'd your wife feel about the whole storyline of them falling into the Grand Canyon?
Oh, she loved it because she knew about my past, and then when she saw BJ do it, she's like, "There's no denying that is your boy. Of course, he would fall in the Grand Canyon."
All right, and then we wind up book 3 in Ghost Town.
Yes, Ghost Town takes place in South Dakota. That was our 3rd year trip up through the Badlands, and that story took place because we actually saw a bunch of police cars running through Deadwood, and it made me think about a bank robbery. And so I did a little research around Deadwood and things that happen around there, and there was the main character in the book, the bad guy, was a true character that came from Texas up there, and he stole, I think at that time it was over $1 million worth of gold from a mining company that they never did find the gold. They did find him, and he ended up not doing too well, as chronicled in the story. But so the kids kind of see all this happen, and they help in the end find the gold and stop the bad guy and everything.
Now, while you're on these trips, are you talking about the story that you're developing in your head, or what are you writing it down as you go along?
The only one we did that with was the first one. The other ones kind of came later once I finally started, kind of got the courage up to try and write a book. Then all the other stories came out. 6 books in total. First 3 with the Hansen clan, but other ones since then. But I've just started. I've got the bug now, and that's all I want to do is write. And the kids are just incredible font of imagination and stuff. And inspiration's incredible.
So they're still inspiring you. How old are they now?
They're 24 and 22.
Are you still taking trips like that?
We are amazingly close family, and we do all sorts of stuff. So yeah, they're. I have a million stories I could write just based on them for sure.
I got to tell you, Bjorn, you're a lucky man. Thank you. Insanity and Grace is the name of our next book, written by a woman who was born into a Jewish family who decided to become a Christian.
So hi, I'm Dr. Ilana Oren. and I live in Tempe, Arizona. I've been a psychotherapist, family therapist since 1976. I still see patients and I still love my work. Basically, all those years I was listening to the stories and the secrets of my patients, and I just felt the need to write my story. And what the book is about is basically about my life. The first 9 years of my life I spent in Poland as a daughter of survivors of the Holocaust. And then in 1957, the Polish regime allowed the Jews that survived the Holocaust to immigrate to Israel. So from the age of 10 to 20, I've lived in Israel and I served in the Israeli army. And then the following phase of my life has been in the United States. I married an American citizen, and that's how I ended up living in the United States, in California, in New York, and for the last 30 years in Arizona that I call home today. I guess what has been unique or maybe inspiring more than anything is the fact that in lieu of my personal difficulties such as divorce and kids and custody, I managed to be very clear about my goals. And ever since I was a little girl, my father used to call me a psychologist. So I just knew that I wanted to make something out of my life. And as a result, I went to UCLA where I finished my BA and then my master's at Chapman University, and later on in life, my PhD. Another piece of my book that I thought was maybe unique to my story, although every individual has their own story. Mine has been the fact that when I was 26, I had a very profound religious experience, which resulted in my conversion to Christianity. So I felt that it's a piece of history that I felt that should be acknowledged by the Israeli and the Jewish educational system, because the impact, needless to say, that Christ has had and Christianity on our history is quite profound. And I saw myself as a product of the Israeli school system, and there is so much emphasis on the Old Testament, and nobody really knows anything about the New Testament. So I thought that that was a life experience that I had that I wanted to share with my readers.
Well, it's an interesting journey. Thanks, Dr. Oren. Dreams helped our next author write her book about time travel and romance in the Beast of Tapley Woods.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Hanley Adams. I work in a tax office, and I live in Sholsburg, Wisconsin. And I have been writing for years, but never, ever really finished anything till this book, The Beast of Tapley Woods. The title was inspired by a local area, which is a forest preserve, and it's called Tapley Woods. And it just struck me one day on the motorcycle, wow, that sounds like a really cool place for a book setting. And then my mind, of course, went into creative overdrive. And a few years ago, I came up with the basic premise of where I wanted it set at. And I picked the setting being a place in Ireland that is very near and dear to me, but I didn't know how I wanted this to go. So I prayed on it, and all of a sudden I had a dream of how it was to start. That would go for several chapters, and if I got stuck, I would have another dream about how it was to keep going. And so basically, it was almost like God was downloading how he wanted this book to go. And this woman, she's just an average woman from the Midwest, and she's on her dream vacation and finds this gravely injured man, and he is from a different time. And he kind of walks him through the modern time and she doesn't really believe him. There's a lot of detective work going on. Of course, it's a love story. It's a romance. And he has to go back to his time to make sure that things are going to be okay if he's able to return. And he goes through some very difficult moments. It's set in County Limerick, Ireland. The cottage is actually my first husband's family cottage, where he was born and raised. And the home of Liam Tapley, my main character, is Castle Oliver in Ireland, which is a place that you can actually go and visit.
You know what this reminds me of is Outlander.
Well, I think that was a basic inspiration because there's a lot of time travel. In real life, there is a place, it's called Oliver's Folly, and it's on the cover of my book. So I had it that there was this old stone with these carvings on it, and no one knows who built it, who put it there, but it was reputed to have magical power. And so there is that element, the fact that he's Scottish, he's a Highlander, but he inherited his estate from his aunt and uncle. And he was building this tower to protect the stone so not anybody could just use it. And it was accidental that he happened to have to use his powers. It wasn't intentional on his part. So yeah, maybe that portion of it, that there's a stone, but there's so much more to this story. It does not reflect on Outlander in any way other than just that stone.
You're a receptionist. Do you tell people when they call for their taxes?
People know in my local community that I do have copies of my book here, so they can come in and buy one, and I have sold quite a few copies that way. You're kind of like a local author. People know you. Yeah. I had a great opening book signing. Awesome. I hired a bagpiper, and it drew in people. People are like, what is going on? So that was fun.
You know, if there's one way to draw attention to a book signing, it's a bagpiper. Good idea. Thanks, Beth. And it is time for us to take a quick break. We're coming right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Strong, fearless, yet flawed. Our next author decided to write about the women he knew from where he grew up in Western PA and the places he traveled, and he succeeds with Morrigan's Daughter.
My name is Patrick Fitch. I am both a retired high school teacher and United States Marine. I served 2 wars, Vietnam and the Gulf, and retired here to Western Kentucky. Our kids graduated from high school here and went to college here. So I can devote full time to this passion I had to write my first 2 books and the novel on which Morrigan's Daughter is based. I had seen so many movies in which I found the women weak. And it just annoyed me because all the women with whom I served in the Marine Corps were precisely the opposite. And it gave me a paradigm for the character that I wanted to write about. Kathleen is both a strong figure, a mother, and a professional person, all wrapped into one, and she handles it. And I think a great many women that I know are just the same. And all the characters in the book are actually based upon people I have encountered in my life. The story goes that Kathleen is on the way home and she gets involved in a small store robbery, and she winds up starting a series of events where she shoots and kills one of the robbers. The local mobster hires 5 people to eliminate her so she and her husband cannot testify against him. I deliberately put in police characters with Western Pennsylvania accents. And if you're not from that area, you likely would not recognize the kind of things that people say there or their pronunciations, because I wanted to make it, a very localized color thing. She winds up doing a very amoral thing by seeking out and killing the last two of the five people who tried to assassinate her family, and regrets it, and she gets away with it. And the reader is left with, do I sympathize with her ethical decision to do that, or am I cheering for her? And I think in the long run, people will cheer. And you will not know the influence that the Celtic goddess Morrigan has till the middle and at the very last page of the book, what that is, if you're unfamiliar with Celtic mythology. And she is a character that has strong ethical and moral beliefs, but then falls into the pit of vengeance. And it was based on the mafia neighborhood in which I grew up. So I wrote it about between 3 and 5 in the morning. Took about 4 months total, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Well, that's good to hear, Patrick. Thank you. With a medical history over 600 pages long, our next author finds a sense of humor is what keeps him going and describes his challenges in his book, Challenges Accepted, 24 Hours to Live.
My name is Jim Cecil. I live at Lake Monticello near Thomas Jefferson's home. I moved here in 2002 to take a position at the University of Virginia. I am now retired at age 78, and I didn't retire until age 74. I really loved my job, and I wished I could have worked longer, but I had some medical issues that prevented me from doing that. I have a lot of stories to tell, and some people kept after me to write a book, so I decided to write a book. I've had a very interesting life, I feel. I lost my parents at age 15. I raised myself. I had to work often in my life in 2 jobs. I found that sometimes adversity makes you a lot stronger. Eventually, paralyzed waist from the waist down. It was degenerative arthritis of the spine, and I had to have a 9-hour surgical operation, and I had a 50-50 chance to come out of that and be able to walk again. But I then went through 9 months just to learn how to walk. And I've had to do that twice. Had 5 heart attacks.
I mean, it's just amazing. You know, you've had all these heart attacks, you had debilitating illnesses, you had an infection in your blood system that they couldn't figure out what it was. They told you they had 24 hours to live, and you're still here.
Exactly. I want to share that with people. I believe no matter what happens in your life, it's not what happens, it's how you take care of it and how you get over it and keep going and have a positive attitude. They say humor is the best medicine, and I believe that. Right now, I've had a broken arm and a replaced elbow. That's happened since I wrote the book. It made it a little tough writing the book, but got through it. I'm hoping, if nothing else, it will help someone else get through any adversity they may have in their life. If I can have even one person do that, I will feel like I've accomplished something.
How do you tell people about this book? Are you able to get out?
Yes, I've gotten over being paralyzed. Right now, it's very tough because of the virus, but I have contacts, friends. I'm using Facebook, and people that I just run into when I'm out, I let them know about the book.
I love your enthusiasm, Jim. Thank you. Finally, our next author uses her book, The Fold, a collection of poetry, to inspire and empower her readers through her life and her poetry.
My name is Lashawn Courtright. I am from Detroit, Michigan. I try to improve myself, and I try to improve others around me with my experiences and with the advice that I received that's been useful to me. I want people to believe in themselves and to know that in spite of their challenges, that their challenges is what shaped them and make them stronger. It's not always there to break you. Sometimes it's just a semblance of what's ahead and to prepare us for better days and for different experiences. What inspired me to write is I'm the oldest of multiple siblings, and I have 6 children. I just always stuck to my writing. I journaled and I wrote about my feelings, and I can go back later and look at those even as a young person. My book is about empowerment. It's a book of poetry. It's about changing yourself, and when you change yourself, that can help change lives around you. And I want people to know that they belong, and our differences is what make us great. These writings are a reflection of how I feel, because I learned if you do something that you love, you never work a day in your life, and you can share that same passion and inspire people just through your ambition and your perseverance.
Have you ever read your poetry in public?
Yes, a couple times with the people who are a part of the readership of the Ground Cover News based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
So you're able to publish your poetry and people know that you're a poet and that you write?
Yes, that's what I've always been known for. Still, I do word of mouth. I encourage people. I read and recite my poetry to people that I see. I tell people where they can buy and purchase my book from. What I want people to know is that through your challenges, you may have obstacles, and the only thing I see my obstacles as is stepping stones. It's a way for me to say, hey, you know what? When you get this, that, and the third, if you get it, this is what you don't want to do. I only have in my mind that I've made it this far, I've done this, so I can go a lot farther, and I can bring others with me in a positive way so that we can have a more unified understanding and a more universal understanding of our own being.
All right, Lashawn, some food for thought as we wrap up this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. If you missed anything, go to 710WOR.com and download the podcast. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.